Greetings and salutations. Welcome. You are talking to one of the most interesting people in the insurance business, not being me. I'm talking about Anthony. I'm the second most interesting. Anthony's first most interesting. Anthony Martin is here today. He is an interesting fellow in the business. He has created a website that generates probably thousands of leads a month now, Anthony, in the final expense space.
If it wasn't thousands, I'd be very upset.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the floor, probably higher.
Yeah.
Anyways, Anthony is the king of final expense in the organic SEO world. And if you haven't watched the old video, we did a video many years ago that people still consistently watch. And it's very fascinating to see how Anthony does business. So basically what this is kind of an updated version of that. We're going to kind of go through the entirety of what he does that's so special that gets him so much business. We're going to learn more about his success in the business, what his thoughts are in doing organic. And if you ever had an interest in building a website or finding people online to sell them any kind of insurance, this is going to be content for you. So make sure you stay tuned. So Anthony, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Well, good to be with you again, David. Always good to see you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
So, just building off what you just said, my name's Anthony. I own Choice Mutual, which is a final expense insurance agency. What makes us unique is the way that we acquire business. So we get all of our business through organic search. And so for those that might be watching that don't know, when you do a search, you start by seeing paid advertisements. So those folks that are there, they're there because they paid. But if you go below that, you're going to see the organic results. Those are the results that search engines have placed there based off their algorithms. So we show up in those organic results for literally thousands of different keywords, and that's how we get all of our consumer traffic.
So in other words, just again, for the person brand new to all this stuff, you're getting leads when people go into Google and it's like, I have dialysis, can I get a burial insurance plan? And then probably Anthony's stuff pops up under all those ads. They click on that, they get a bunch of useful information about the topic, and some of those are compelled then to fill out your form on your site, your quote request, and then create it as a lead, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I like the idea of this, just to sit back, let people come to you, right? And it sounds kind of ideal, right? Versus all this outbound calling and door knocking. Is this for everybody? Is this something that's easy?
It's definitely not for everybody. I mean, you're right. It is really nice. I mean, the biggest advantage with SEO is you don't have the acquisition costs, right? So I didn't pay to have, I mean, there's an acquisition cost in the sense that it takes time and effort. And there's definitely money that I put in other than just sweat equity to make this a reality over time. But it definitely wouldn't be something that would be for everybody. So the biggest challenge for SEO is that it takes a lot of time. So if you're like a new person, or if you're looking to maybe reinvent yourself, or maybe just take your business to the next level, you wouldn't look to SEO as something that would provide you with gains in the next 12 months. This is a long-term investment. And it's one I think is still worthwhile, but it's not something that's going to produce any fruit on the tree for a meaningful period of time. And then outside from that, I wouldn't recommend it for most people, because truthfully, most people just don't have the discipline and the work ethic over a prolonged period of time with no payoff or promise of payoff for that matter, where they would be able to actually see the results one day. Most people, we've seen lots of people start websites, you've run into them before, and they usually stop after about maybe 3 months. Some go a little bit longer, but most people just can't stick with it long enough to make it a reality.
Yeah. And granted, I mean, it's more competitive than it ever has been. There's more dollars, there's more companies in the space. You have to be like I mean, if you talk to Anthony long enough, he's a master of his craft. You can just read between the lines, and he knows what's going on with his competition. He knows what's working, what's not. And you better be on Anthony's level if you plan to even have a chance of competing. So, and let's build on that, because where you got started was in 2016. It's 2022 at the filming of this. What's changed?
It's quite a bit has changed. Before I get to that, let me just address one thing you just said. Do me a favor. Ask me what I do for a living.
What do you do for a living?
Well, actually, let me also say this, because this is something that people ask all the time. But when people ask me that question, my response is I work for Google.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I don't really work for Google, but I kind of do, because my entire profession is learning the algorithm and doing what it takes to create content that shows up in the algorithm. So, and from that perspective, I take it very seriously.
Yeah.
But to answer your question about what's different, so there's two primary differences. One is there is a lot more competition, and the competition now is from a lot of big players. So if we were to go back in time, when I started in 2016, sites like Investopedia, Value, Penguin, The Balance, there's new ones come up all the time. These are websites that have brands, some of them maybe not household names like a Forbes website, but they have an extensive history online and a huge amount of authority, which is another way of saying, how trustworthy is the website in the eyes of Google and other search engines. So these websites now, they all have content about final expense insurance topics, whereas when I started, they did not. So one of the biggest challenges that exists today compared to before is you're competing with really large brands that have a huge authority, much higher than anything even I have. And I have a really high authority after doing it for all this time, let alone compared to a new person. And they also have really big budgets. So they're putting forth a lot of dollars to creating this content. And I will just say that historically, like, I don't know, maybe you go back 3 years ago, the content that a lot of these big websites would create was really subpar. I mean, it was really awful, but they've gotten a lot better at producing good content. So they've really stepped up their game in that regard. So them producing good content coupled with their extreme authority makes them a very formidable opponent. So that's one of the biggest differences today that existed then. And then the other one would be just the algorithm itself. So Google has for years transitioned to a model where they are placing a heavy emphasis on trust. Whereas before, the emphasis was more on, I guess, how well the user was being satisfied. And don't get me wrong, there are still a massive part of the algorithm that focuses on serving that search intent. But one of the biggest challenges today is your site trustworthy enough where even though you have great content, are they willing to risk showing it to the users in fear of that you might cause harm, if that makes sense? So that's one of the biggest challenges as well.
Yeah. So can we connect or when we say trust and authority, we're basically saying the same thing, right?
Yes. Yeah, those words would be essentially synonyms.
Sort of.
But for people to kind of understand what that means. So in terms of Google, the primary way that they develop trust for a website is links from other websites to yours, right? So if one website links to another, that acts like a trust signal, almost like an endorsement. Whereas if I was getting into FE business and I was looking for an IMO, if David Dufert says, wow, this guy, Anthony, I vouch for him, you've essentially endorsed me. That's like a passing of trust. It's similar to that. Now, it's not just as simple as how many links you have. There's great nuance to it. The type of links, the type of content that appears on the pages linking from, what page they're linking to. There's the text. So there's a lot of different nuance to that. But at a high level, links from other websites is overwhelmingly the metric that Google uses to determine how trustworthy a website is. And then the other thing that has emerged that's become really, I guess, kind of a popular thing in the SEO space in the last couple of years is this term of EAT, which stands for expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So a few years back, Google publicly released an extensive set of guidelines called the Search Quality Rater Guidelines. And essentially what it is a document that outlines clear instructions for human beings to assess Google's search results as a means to measure how well they're doing at, showing results to users. And so these quality rater guidelines are like a gold mine of information for website users, because even though it doesn't tell you here's how the algorithm works, it's the goal of the guidelines is to get people to determine how well they're producing results. Then you can kind of reverse engineer. And the other thing that's amazing about the document is they'll show you examples of good and bad results, or I'm sorry, good and bad websites in terms of like how trustworthy it may be. So from that perspective, another means of trust that a website can have is what are they doing on site? So a basic example, is there an offer that's clearly visible? does that author actually have expertise in the topic? Like
Right.
you and I are experts at insurance, in particular final expense insurance. We can speak with great authority on this topic. But if we were to transition and start talking about engineering and what it takes to properly build a safe building, you and I have, well, I don't think you're an engineer, but I know I'm not, but we can't talk about that with any level of credibility. Right. So if we produce content on a website about that, Google is not going to risk showing our content to users because we're not qualified to do so. So there are a lot of things on site that a person could do, and there's off-site ways you can do to build your own expertise that they've implemented now in the algorithm that determine, if you're going to rank aside from just links as well.
Can you speak briefly to why Google has shifted towards more weighing trust signals as opposed to the quality? And we both agree quality content absolutely matters, but trust seemingly has become more and more important as time has progressed. Why do you think that's been the case?
I think it's for two primary reasons. One, I think it's really the natural progression. Like an entity like Google is massive. They command 92% of the entire search market. So I think it's really just a matter of like competitive, like the natural result of competition. Really, just it was bound for this to happen. Because from one perspective, if you think about it, if Google's job from the very beginning was to connect people with the information that's out there, that's their whole goal, right? That does carry some, they have some sort of fiduciary responsibility in a sense to connect people with information that's not going to harm them. Now, that's a very broad statement and there's pros and cons to that, but in essence, that's really, their responsibility. Just like as insurance agents, we can put people with any insurance carrier we want, but at the end of the day, we do have some level of fiduciary responsibility to put them with the right product. It may not be the cheapest, but there's a balancing act there. So I think it's just natural that they went down that path just because they're used, to connect people with information. But the other thing, in my opinion, is I think it's their attempt to avoid government regulation. With Donald Trump, there was so much emphasis on disinformation and people being misinformed, and especially with COVID. I think that they're trying their hardest to avoid the government, having the eye focus on them for regulation, because if that happens, they'll make less money.
It's like the comic book, The Watchmen. It's like who watches The Watchmen? But that you're right. It's with the whole fake news era. It's like whether you're pro or con, whatever on that. It's interesting because Google is the arbiter. It's the middleman for information. And it's because of the outcome of its success in delivering quality results. And they find themselves, I believe, just like you, in a position where avoiding harm from the government's one thing, but also they have this responsibility. Like it's not just any information, it's who's got the best perspective, the most trustworthy. It's a perilous situation, one of power, but responsibility.
So and it's important for people to remember too, that in terms of the type of, like Google looks at websites differently. So as insurance agents, we fall into the category of what, and this is Google describing it as YMYL, since for your money, your life. And that's any website that falls under a set of a category that they deem could result in great harm to your life, right? So insurance, money, politics, news, health. So if you're a website that falls in one of these categories, their requirements for trustworthiness and expertise are significantly higher compared to a cooking website. So, from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Like if they're going to show users information in a category that could really harm them financially or health or otherwise, that's significant to their life, it makes a lot of sense that they would have very high standards for the trustworthiness of the website. If you just start a website tomorrow and you're giving out financial advice on retirement, it may be the most sound advice ever. But if there's no metrics online to determine whether or not you're trustworthy or not, they just can't take the risk of showing users that information, even though it truly is the best.
Right.
Which I totally agree with that position. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's like you said, it's a natural outcome of success because the algorithm's not suited towards, it's got to be suited towards advertisers and users, right? It's got to satisfy both. It's an interesting middle ground.
A lot of people will, like I've been hearing this question a lot. A lot of people will say, if Google, if Google can just show users information and they don't land on the site, then they can just absorb all the advertising revenue. And so a lot of people will be scared that over time, Google is just going to show all the information. People aren't going to get any clicks. And the thing people have to understand is that will never happen because Google exists to get users and get those users to recurrently use their website. If they were to make changes in such a way that people never had to click on a website, that would result in a lower user base, which means lower advertising base. So there's always going to be this balancing act. Like people say, well, why can't Google just show one page of ads? Because nobody would use Google anymore.
Right.
Nobody's going to go to Google and because ads, like they work, but truthfully, most people look at the organic results because that gives people the real information that they're looking for. And that's what keeps them coming back. So there's never going to be a scenario where people aren't going to show up on the first page organically. There's never going to be a chance that the first page is all paid results. That'll never happen.
Yeah, and that compromises I would imagine the value system of Google to the core. When they forget the user.
Tremendously, yeah.
So let's change gears because a lot of what we're talking about here is national in scope, but a lot of questions we get asked from agents is what about the local strategy? So does search engine optimization work for a local lead generation strategy? What's your thoughts on recommending that?
Definitely, and it's something that people should definitely do. So just to clarify for people that don't understand, in terms of SEO, there's national SEO and then there's local SEO. So national is when you rank for a result when somebody searches something. It doesn't matter where you are, right? Those are the national results. Local is when you show up on that little map pack. So like if you go to your phone right now and type in, Chinese restaurant, the very first thing you see is going to be a map that shows like local businesses, right? And so most people, when they search, the primary thing they're going to see is like the local results. So for people to show up in the local results, it's substantially easier for them to do that. That's much lower hanging fruit than it is to show up in the national results. So like national, you're looking at years of time and effort to show up there in most cases, but local, it's significantly different. So it's something that I would recommend everybody do. Like I mentioned before, I don't really recommend the national pursuit for a lot of people just for the reasons that I already mentioned, but local should be something that everybody does at a bare minimum because it's pretty simple. And in essence, you probably want to have a website. I don't know, you might be able to rank organically, locally without a website, but I think it's probably going to be a stretch. And then who would want to do business with a company that doesn't even have a website. But the primary thing you want to do is focus on getting your Google My Business profile created, which is free, and then getting reviews on your Google My Business page. That's the biggest thing you can do to show up in those local results, and putting some basic on-site optimizations, that mention like, I'm in Reno, so I would want to mention, final expense insurance in Reno or something like that, or Nevada, so that those keywords are there. And then the other thing is just making sure that your name, address, and phone number are homogeneous across the web. So, you don't want Choice Mutual to appear in one way with one address on one place, but in different ways elsewhere, because that sends confusing signals. So it's really not hard to do. And the cool thing is you can subscribe to a service like Moz Local. I don't even know what it costs because it's so ridiculously cheap. And they'll make sure that your name, your address, and phone number are the same on all these different platforms. So that's definitely something I would recommend every business do. I don't care what they're doing, what vertical they're in, or whether they want to pursue national one day. Everybody should do that.
So if we think about the local scope, and we put in like insurance agent near us, there's likely going to be some competition. Maybe there's very little. Let's say for this example, there's some competition. How can you show up on the top end? Like, what is the primary driver to being the first choice in that collection of local results that show up?
GMB reviews. So your review star total. So it's could be like maybe 5 out of 5 stars or 4 out of 5 stars. So obviously you want to focus on getting positive reviews and then the total number of reviews. So the GMB reviews is going to be the biggest thing that determines that you're going to be there. And just, you mentioned about competition. Yes, if you search now, I don't care where you are, there's going to be people that show up, but 99% of the time they're there by default. They're not there because they've tried to do this. So this is another reason it's really low-hanging fruit, is because most people aren't actively pursuing this strategy. So if you put forth the effort to make it a reality, you'll easily beat the people that are there by default.
And any like simple tips to cultivate reviews on Google as far as being intentional about it, but doesn't take a lot of like elaborate effort?
Yep. So on our site, we use Trustpilot at this point. We've been using it for years. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I wouldn't recommend Trustpilot unless if you have a much larger or website traffic volume, or if you have like a huge customer base, then it makes a lot of sense. But if you're not in that position, getting reviews is really simple. Like this is what we used to do prior to using Trustpilot. We would just say, hey, just so you know, you're going to get an email where you can leave us an online review if you want. And it was that simple. We didn't even ask. We just simply said, hey, you're going to get this email. And the thing is, you want to make sure that whatever email you send people, you make it very simple for them to do so. So like if we had people that had a Gmail, then we would send them one that directs them to the G&B profile. But if they had like Hotmail, we'd probably send them to, like Facebook or BBB. I stopped sending people to BBB anymore because it's a total scam. I don't know if you know this, but it's insane. But I think having a BBB profile and paying for accreditation is important, and it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it. And I think it's like $500 a year. But the reason why I say it's a total scam with their reviews is because those reviews disappear after 3 years. Like
really?
one day,
Wow.
one day I looked, because we used to collect reviews on there. We had a bunch. And one day I looked and I was like, they're all gone. And I called them up and I was like, what the heck happened here? And they said, oh, they just expired for 3 years. I'm like, that'd have been nice to know, because it's really unfortunate. But like, I'm not going to send anybody to the BBB to leave a review knowing that 3 years from now they're all gone. Like right now we have, I don't know, like just shy of 800 reviews on Trustpilot. But if 36 months ago, the ones from 36 months prior start falling off, and that number is going to constantly be in a state of flux. I mean, it's stupid to me. But anyways, just telling people that you're going to get a review email and make it easy for them to do so. I mean, you can even ask people. I mean, I was always just really fond of telling people that they're going to get the email instead of asking. But as long as you're mentioning or asking, you're going to get the reviews.
Yeah.
And the problem is most people just don't do that.
Yeah, we have on our little call center, when we close a deal, we send them an automated email that says, hey, thanks for your business. Can you take 5 seconds to give us a review, good, bad, or ugly? Click here. That's it. Yeah. And probably 1 out of 10 do it. But hey, it's nice. It adds a little bit here and there every month and shows some validity modern day, right? In the sense of, if you've got reviews, and I always look at places and think, well, that review is like a year. The last review is like 4 or 5 months ago. It's like, well, how current are they still working? If you're getting constant reviews, it shows that you're fresh, you're still working, you're out there making things happen. So definitely worth the effort.
I mean, it's social proof, right? And there's lots of studies out there that you can look up that confirm, I don't want to say confirm, that demonstrate that people that are businesses have reviews convert at a higher level. And I can speak personally, like we have a lot of reviews online, and it's been a huge driver in people deciding to call us. Like, I can't tell you how many conversations that I've had and had other agents have where people will say, we contacted you because of how many reviews and how positive they were online. I mean, I literally hundreds and hundreds of times. So it's a worthwhile pursuit for so many different reasons. And I think if you're not doing it, you're legitimately insane, and you're just not taking your business seriously.
Thanks for that little gold nugget. I'm going to go look back at my page and make sure I've got reviews on all of them in some form or fashion. I think that's a big one. So you mentioned earlier, back to national SEO, we were talking about authority and trust, and the way in which you build it is essentially creating what's called links, referrals from other sites, used as a form of validation that, kind of like a refer, right?
Yep.
Of course, out in, the world, there's an never-ending supply of companies that will take your money and provide for you links. My question to you, should you do that?
Generally speaking, and I would say most of the time, no. So think about it from this perspective. How many times in life if something's really easy, is it worth it? Sometimes that's true, but most time if it's easy, it's probably not worth it. And so from that perspective, if you think about it from that perspective, if a link is easy to get, it's generally going to have no value. So common examples, everybody can get a link from Facebook, right? You just create a profile, and that's why it has no value. Like, you're not going to boost your SEO rankings by having a link from Facebook all of a sudden, or having hundreds of them. It doesn't make any difference. there are tons and tons of websites where they exist for no other reason than to sell links to people. That's how they make money. Like as a website owner, you know this too. Every single day, I get probably 20 different inquiries from different places asking if I want to buy links or if I accept posts on my site for a fee, or if I'll just insert links. Like it's a massive business and they probably make a lot of money doing it. But the thing is, if you can buy links from any of these places, it doesn't have any value. And well, it almost certainly doesn't have any value. There are definitely circumstances where PageRank will pass from these links.
Right.
But the problem with people that go out and buy links is that even if it provides short-term gains, which full disclosure, it does. Like you can buy links and provide some short-term gains. Long-term, the strategy simply will not work for a couple of reasons. One, Google will eventually catch on and either completely stop passing PageRank to your links, because it's only a matter of time, because they're not stupid. Nobody's smarter than all the people at Google. But the other thing that could happen that probably would if you continue to do it is they'll probably hit you with a manual action, which for people that don't know what that means, that's basically when Google says, we have detected algorithmically that your link profile is artificially inflated. You participated in some sort of link scheme or something like that, and we are banning you from the search results. You get a manual action, you're gone from search overnight. When that happens, you can fix it, but then you have to remove a lot of links. You don't know which ones are causing the manual action, and so you're probably going to end up like disavowing a bunch of links that are legitimately good, but you don't know. So like in my thought process, if I'm going to be engaged in a business, I'm thinking about long term, right? Like I didn't start this or do anything so that I can be in business for 5 years and then have a great 5 years and then just be totally done after that, you know, and just have no more revenue coming in. I don't know who thinks like that, but if you do want to have a long-term business, buying links is never going to get you there, you know. So there are people out there that take the risk and they buy the links for the short-term gains, and that's their decision. But if you want to be in this long-term, it's simply not going to work.
What would you suggest for a starting agency website, how to build links in a way that's not, you know, a scam like these other places?
So by far, and it just stuns me how people still don't make this a priority, is Haro. I've talked about this so many times. So Haro stands for Help a Reporter Out, and it's a completely free service. You sign up for it, and what happens is Haro will email you 3 different times a day from different websites or journalists looking for sources to write their article. So let's just say there's a query that comes through and it says, you know, what are the pros and cons of whole life insurance? You know, that's the basic example. As a website owner, you can respond directly to that query. What happens is, not every time, but you'll have journalists that'll use your responses in their article, and as a means to give you credit, they'll link back to your website. And the thing is, the queries that come through a lot of times are from websites that have really high authority. Like when I look here, so like last month we landed, what was it? 7 links through just strictly Haro. And I'll read you some numbers here. These are domain authority metrics. And so for people that don't understand this, these are all really high numbers: 83, 70, 56, 82, 68, 86. Those numbers are really high. And the thing is, anybody can do it. People just don't make it a priority. So like you can land some really high authority links from just using Haro. Everybody should make that a priority. Outside of that, it's going to get a lot more complicated. So to build links, you know, you can Google online, like, you know, how do you build backlinks to websites? There's a lot of good guides out there. Resource link building is a pretty replicatable method, and at a high level, you basically create a resource that's not meant to rank organically for keywords. It's just a helpful, informative piece of information, and you basically do email outreach to different websites that have a section on the website that where it would be appropriate or relevant for them to link to your content as a value add to their users. It's a very email intensive process, but it works. Like, I haven't done resource link building in quite a while because of other tactics that we've been doing that produce better fruit on the tree. But when I did it, I mean, we've got hundreds of links through that method as well. So that's something that anybody could do. You can do it through Sweat Equity. The other thing that you can do is broken link building. I haven't done this in a long time, but when I was first starting, that's something I did. And that's essentially where you look for websites that have in like a relevant niche that you're in, and you look to see what backlinks they have that may be broken, that lead to like a full 4-page. And then it's just manual outreach. Say, hey, you got this broken page, thought you should know about it. If you want to place another website that is similar, that's updated, that works, here you go. And then they'll link back to you. But definitely not, I mean, outside of that, I don't know what else people could do, because like when I was starting out, those are the things that I did, but then it transitioned to other things over time that requires more money to do. So it's different for me these days. But those things, that's all sweat equity. Anybody can do that today if they're just starting out.
Yeah, I think the big thing and this is kind of the reason I pulled back from it personally, because I used to be into the building side of the organic more years ago.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time, and it's really, you're a promotional person. It's not about buying links. It's about, you got to get out there and promote your website and create good content, resource guides like you've done. And it is an effort that requires, this is why so many people don't do it. It's because it's not easy. It's time consuming, and you've got to be creative, and you've got to stay with it for years. And if you're not willing to do that, guys, I mean, like, don't, because there's a lot more people with more, possibly more discipline, time, and money that are willing to do it.
Yeah, this is unquestionably the reason why I don't recommend this for most people, is because the link barrier is the biggest problem. Like I've seen countless examples of people build sites and they create content and they continue to do so. And a lot of them do a good job of creating content, but it's the link barrier that gets people to stop eventually, is because either they don't start, or they start and they shortly thereafter stop, or they don't find a way to go beyond. Like, you can have a lot of success doing the Haro resource and broken link building. You can generate quite a few links doing that, especially over 1 or 2 years, right? But if you want to get to the point where you're writing like significant amounts of business from organic traffic, you have to go beyond that, which means you're going to have to start investing money, right? It's like content promotional pieces that we do today. They're not like, I have teams of people that coordinate with me on various aspects of that. And it's not something you do for $1,000. Let me just say it that way. But, that's what it takes to keep landing these large volume of high authority leads to go to the next level. So most people just don't take the link building seriously. And that's why it's just never going to pan out for most people. And again, that's why I don't recommend most people do it, because I just know they're not willing to.
Right. 100%, man.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we should avoid when trying to rank organically besides buying crappy leads or crappy links?
I would, on the content piece side, I would recommend that people avoid trying to just mimic what other people do. So I see this a lot. Like, my site has been plagiarized like dozens and dozens of times. Like I don't care, because truthfully, my revenge comes the day that they decide to give up. And it happens every time. I see it all the time. Everybody will eventually give up. And it's at that moment, those folks should realize that I'm smiling, going, you never should have stole my content in the first place, right? And that's cool with me. But what a lot of mistakes that people make when they get started is they go, who else out there is having success? Could be me, could be somebody else. And they just try to mimic what they're doing. And the problem with that is they don't learn. They don't go through the curve necessary to learn how to create content.
Mimic as in plagiarize, or just like copy the same ideas you do in their own words?
Yeah. So like what I see all the time is, like, I'll look at a page that somebody created, and every single headline is the same as mine. And even if they write the body of the paragraph below it in their own words, they're copying the same structure as mine, right? And that's never going to cut it. So like, they're not learning, they're not thinking, they're just replicating, right? And so the absence of them learning is going to result in their failure, short and long term. They're never going to succeed doing that. So if somebody's getting started, there's definitely places where you look at other websites to learn certain things. But on the content side, you can't just simply copy what other people are doing or use theirs as the sole inspiration for how you're going to structure your content. Like when I create content, I don't look at other websites. I focus on trying to create a piece of content from scratch that's going to legitimately best satisfy the search intent. Whatever that takes, I create that piece of content. I don't care how long it takes or what I have to do. That's my sole goal. I don't in any way, shape, or form look at another piece of content that I'm trying to compete with and go, oh, they're doing these things. I'll do something similar. And that's how I'm going to structure it. Because I know that's just not going to work.
Right. Right. So wrapping this up here, what's SEO look like over the next 5 to 10 years?
It's going to get more and more difficult. Their push towards emphasis on trust and authority is going to continue to go in that direction. So it's going to be ever more important to continue to build links, continue to build out really high quality content, because like they're doing a really good job at learning what's the difference between good and bad content. So that's going to be something that becomes more and more important. The other thing is learning how to create the right type of content. So like, if you look right now, it seems like what Google is doing is they're looking for certain entities on pages. So like, let me give you an example. Like, remember when I told you that I was like super excited for you that you're in the knowledge graph.
Yeah, right.
Because and for people to understand this, it's amazing. I'm so freaking jealous. But if you go to Google and you type in the words David Duford, he shows up in the knowledge panel off on the right. And it even says like, you know, he's a life insurance agent or something like that. So, and if you type in the search bar, it'll generate different search results that include data, like what's David's net worth, you know, what's his agency, or there's different search terms that will auto-populate. So you are like a significant entity in the Google knowledge graph. And virtually everybody's in the knowledge graph because everything online is really categorized in some way, shape, or form. But it seems like one of the things they're doing is trying to make sure that content represents the appropriate entities on page that they feel should be represented. So I know that kind of sounds confusing, but let me give an example. If you're going to write an article about, let's say, final expense insurance, and you don't mention that it's life insurance, right? That would likely be a problem for Google, because if you imagine you take the entity that is final expense insurance, that entity has multiple factors to it, like what's the cost, what is it, where do you buy it, how do you qualify, right? There's multiple ways in which it branches off from there. As you know, it's a life insurance policy. So if you don't touch on the fact that it is a life insurance policy, more than likely Google is going to look at that and say that's a problem, because you're not delivering content to people that has complete information. And so anyways, going back to what I was saying, so I think one of the things they're going to continue to do is make sure that content, particularly in the why and wow space, adheres to content quality standards that make sure that the appropriate entities are represented on your page, to know that you're doing a complete job of giving the users all the information that they're ideally looking for.
So more content specificity, I guess you could say, in a sense, plus authority.
I would say thoroughness.
Thoroughness, yeah.
Probably be the right word to describe what. So the idea of entities on page is really a confusing topic, and it's difficult to explain. But I guess if you had to like make it in the dummy version, it would just be making sure that you have a really thorough piece of content that covers all the different avenues of the topic that you're discussing, particularly when you're talking about insurance.
Yeah. Yet still being user friendly.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and being authoritative.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, this is not meant to replace those other requirements in terms of content quality as well. I guess this would be an augmentation of all of those.
Right. It's an improvement upon it. Yeah. It's really fascinating. It's amazing the job Google has done and what they continue to do. As much flack as they get, you know, they're the best at it, man. That's why they got 92% of the search, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's nobody that comes close as far as like a search engine goes. Like, I know some people will be fond of things like DuckDuckGo because of their push for privacy. That's cool, man. I respect that you want to support a search engine or use a search engine that focuses on privacy. I prefer to just, use a search engine that gives me like quality results. And like over the years of doing this, even for non-insurance terms, like the results of other search engines are just, they baffle me. I mean, especially when I compare them to Google, I just don't understand. I just don't understand how they come up with the algorithms that produce the results that they do. It's puzzling to me.
It's like you said on the last video too. It's like, well, if you still do a fantastic job, they're going to rank high on any search, right? I mean, at the end of the day, so it's like, and who cares about 8%? If you can corner 92% of the market, it's like, so what?
I don't know. Cody Askers may disagree. I'm just kidding. You said 8%. Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you focus on succeeding in Google, then you're more than likely going to succeed in the other search engines as well. I mean, there's definitely plenty of examples that I can show you where somebody's going to rank well in Google, but in Yahoo, a literal spam site is beating them. And
really?
On the first, it's like literal spam sites. Like I don't understand how it's possible, but you can't win both battles. Like you're just not going to. But fortunately, most of the time you will win in Yahoo or Bing or any other search engine for that matter, if you're also winning Google.
Right. So final couple of questions. I'm sure somebody's going to ask you, are you hiring? Do you do consulting?
I don't do SEO consulting because it would result in too much of a pay cut. I don't teach people how to do websites or anything like that. I don't hire remote agents, so we get calls every week from people wanting to work. We don't work like most IMOs where we'll just work with anybody across the nation. So unless you're in Reno, Nevada, unfortunately, the answer is no.
Right. Don't call Anthony. He's too busy. Trust me. This is why he did this video. He's just come here, watch this. And it really is enough to get started, truly. And the other one's excellent as well. Anything else, Anthony? I think we wrapped it up there.
Pretty much. The only other thing I guess I would touch on is SEO services. So like this is like a really common thing. If anybody really wants to get an SEO, I would caution them strongly against purchasing SEO services. So there are a lot of SEO services that are totally worth it, but truthfully, a lot of them are complete and total scams. They just are. And their business model is very simple. They're going to offer you something that's low enough in price that you can afford to lose money on it. Usually it's like $3.99 a month or $5.99 a month. And so they'll dangle these shiny features in you. Usually it's like keyword tracking, monthly reporting, competitor analysis, rank tracking, like these things that sound to like amazing. And to the untrained eye, like they sound like they're good things, right? And some of them maybe even offer to write content for you. The thing is, I can promise you, any SEO service that's under $1,000 is going to be a waste of your money. And then keyword tracking is worthless. All those things that I just mentioned, you don't need to pay for any of that. You can do that on your own. A subscription to SEMrush can do all that for you for far less. But the thing is, if you're going to pay somebody for SEO, it should really be for one of maybe a few things. Are they going to generate links for you? Again, if they're offering a pay to play, like you paid me $1,000, I get you a link on Forbes. That's probably a bad idea. But if they were creating content that was going to be promoted in some way, and then websites would decide to link to that, that would be okay. But that's not what you're going to get for $500 a month, right? So it's link building or creating content. Let me just tell you, you pay somebody $500 a monthly retainer for them to produce 3 pieces of content. Whatever they're going to produce for you is going to be entirely worthless. And some of them will even go so far as to be stupidly transparent to say it'll be 600 to 1,000 words. Well, maybe in 2005 that would have worked, right. But in 2022, 600 to 1,000 words isn't going to do jack. You're not going to rank for that type of content. And then maybe there's some technical stuff. So maybe they'll work on core web vitals for you, or make sure like you have your site's free of like broken redirects or something like that. But to put it plainly, like if you're not willing to spend like $2,000 a month for a quality SEO service, it's probably a complete waste of money. So I wouldn't recommend people do that, because it's sad when people support those things thinking that they're going to see their rankings improve because they signed up for this. And the advertisements for these SEO services would make you believe that you're going to pay for this $400 a month, and then you're going to just constantly move up in Google, it's just not going to happen. So don't waste your money doing that.
Yeah, it's the whole baffling with bullshit stuff. You know, it's
Yeah,
like you don't know any better. It's just it comes back to the fundamentals, man. So much in life is just about the fundamentals. And the secret is doing it consistently for a long time, because it's why you got where you are. You know,
I would just end by saying this: if somebody wanted to do this on a national scale, they need to be prepared to work 20 hours a week for the next 24 months with no promise of reward. If you can't and aren't willing to do that, you shouldn't even bother there, because you just don't have any chance of succeeding otherwise.
Right. So buy leads.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I would say in the interim, you should definitely get into a system where you're working leads for sure. So I would call David, and he has an agency that probably could help you.
Well, Anthony, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate your time as always. I know you're super busy, and appreciate your insight. Buddy. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, man. And see you around. Okay.
You too, buddy. All right, man. Take care.
Bye.